Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel, click that notifications button, and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. So let's talk boxing. I have just uploaded another video. It was to do with the controversy about the alleged cover-up of Billy Joe Saunders, really Mark Tibbs and Ben Davison, and the contrasting views they gave regarding Billy Joe Saunders and what the possible motives could be in this situation. So we discussed that. And in that same video, I talk about Canelo Alvarez's proposed fight in the UK next year and which British fighters would be best placed to be in a position where maybe they could throw a spanner in the works against the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world and maybe even cause an upset. So check that video out and let me know what you think of it. I'll put a link to it to pop up right at the end of this video. For this particular video, I want to talk about some of the things that are occurring in the politics of the sport at the moment with regards to ducks and who's trying to make what fights happen and stuff like that, and what it means for the wider sport really at the moment, or the divisions that are in question. So one of the fights, as I'm sure you're all aware by now, because this has happened a few days ago, that isn't going to happen, that fell through, was Michael Hunter pulling out against Hrgovic. Now, we know that Filip Hrgovic won the purse bid. He was ready to take on that fight. Michael Hunter was saying all the right things. There was some, he missed some drugs tests, 1 or 2 drugs tests. It's unclear what's gone on there. He claims he passed the drugs. He's had it back and forth with Suleiman on Twitter. However, he's pulled out. And that was a final eliminator for the IBF. So a lot of people started criticizing him. He's ducking, he's doing this, he's doing that. Well, he's now fighting an eliminator, not a final eliminator, but an eliminator for the WBA. And if he wins that fight, then he fights a final eliminator. So we're going to talk about this for a second, because I have to say this. Personally, I think he's done the right thing from the perspective of his career. For us fans, it's terrible and it's a straight up duck. But stylistically, and I rate Michael Hunter highly, I think Hrgovic would have beaten him. Whereas I think stylistically, he can have a lot more success against guys that are bigger names. So as a result, he's the sort of heavyweight who I believe should consider how to manufacture his way to the top. David Haye was an expert at doing this. David Haye, on his way up, was fighting guys like Monty Barrett, like John Ruiz, guys that perhaps, there would have been harder fights along the way. He could have fought guys like Takam, like Ibragimov, like Chagayev, like Tony Thompson. Instead, he went for guys that perhaps were either at the end of their careers or had just retired. Audley Harrison's another one, guys that weren't really top level. And he jumped sort of from the C-rate guys straight to the A-list he fought Value for a world title, and then of course he fought Vlad. And I think that's how Michael Hunter needs to try and manufacture his career, because he's got certain attributes that I think will look very, very good against some of the bigger names in the sport. But if he's not careful and he fights a guy like Hrgovic, because he's so dangerous, if he loses a fight like that against Hrgovic, some of the bigger names might never give Michael Hunter a chance. So let's talk about this. Like I said, terrible for the fans, right? I want to see the fight. I'm not excusing the duck. I'm just trying to explain the thought process that they're doing. I believe is the thought process. You see, in the WBA, before we get onto Styles, actually no, let's talk about Styles first. I think he's a very, very fast guy who's able to close the range very suddenly and very quickly. And when he does close that range, he's very good at getting in the pocket and leading with power shots. He lands with these leading power shots and he can stay in the pocket. And as he throws, he punches through the target and almost falls into the opponent. So he can stay very close up on your chest. And then he'll throw another power shot from there. So he can be a little bit scruffy, it looks like. But instead of smothering his work, he still finds a way to get his shots off. And like I said, he's an ultra-fast starter. We saw it against Alexander Usyk. He was 3 rounds up in that fight. And then Usyk came back and took over and won the fight. He hurt Povetkin early, nearly stopped him in the first round in a fight that I thought he won, but it was officially given a draw. But Povetkin did come back more as the fight wore on. So you saw that he's a fast starter that starts to slow. And we've seen this quite consistently with him. Well, against some of the more cumbersome heavyweights, comparatively speaking, to some of the lighter ones, the lighter heavyweights, guys like Anthony Joshua, guys like Tyson Fury even, who's very fast for a big heavyweight, unbelievably fast. But perhaps not, perhaps Tyson Fury struggles a little bit more with some of the smaller, faster guys like Cunningham, who dropped him. And you know what's interesting? I once heard Fury say cruiserweights hit harder than heavyweights because he said the mass isn't that different, but they throw the shots more quickly. So it's not really a question of power. If you're going to measure the power of a big heavyweight compared to a cruiserweight, they probably don't hit as hard. But it's the shots you don't see coming that hurt more, right? So if Tyson Fury struggles a little bit more with that suddenness, maybe he absorbs those shots more powerfully, and so he feels them more. See where I'm getting at? So there's a potential there for Michael Hunter to fancy his chances against Fury. And according to the rumours recently, when Fury was sporting a black eye days before the Canelo fight, well, guess what? He'd been sparring Michael Hunter. So Michael Hunter might fancy his chances of getting inside against some of the bigger, more cumbersome heavyweights that have got big names and causing an upset. Whereas Hrgovic, who's a very loose and languid heavyweight, who, sometimes he'll use that lead hand just to rotate and have it in your face. And if he'll catch you with little shots as you're trying to come in to keep you off balance, and then try to take a step back and land the right hand. And if he hurts you, walk you down and stuff like that. He's not as good. He's definitely not as good. But he reminds me of, stylistically, of Vitaly Klitschko. So maybe he's looking at this and he's thinking, that's not the right fight for me. Well, Mike Wilson, you'd have to say he has a big chance of winning that fight. If he comes through that fight, let's look at who would be the final eliminator potentially for Michael Hunter. And let's talk about whether you then understand his decision. At the moment, you're seeing this weekend, I think it is, the potential for the champion in recess, Manuel Charr, who's looking to fight Christopher Lovejoy, who's 17-0, who nobody has seen fight. And although he's 17-0, his opponents have an cumulative record of 51, 192 and 19, right? None of them have been anywhere near world-class status. And this stuff is in the boxing news this month as well, by the way. They've really gone in hard. They're calling them the WBA, the worst boxing association. All right, so they're really at them. But Manuel Charr being the champion in recess, you've got Anthony Joshua, of course, is the super champion. That's the big reward, right? The winner of AJ Fury. You've got Trevor Bryan, who's the world champion. Robert Helenius, who's the gold champion. Then you've got Daniel Dubois fighting Bogdan Dinu for the WBA interim title. Well, Bogdan Dinu, to put this into perspective, Bogdan Dinu was ranked 9th by the WBA. Okay, now let's actually think about what I'm about to tell you. Ranked 9th by the WBA in 2018. He then lost to Jarrell Miller in November 2018, and in March 2019, he lost to Kubrat Pulev. Since then, he's beaten 2 unrated fighters, and last year, he returned, and guess what? Without fighting anyone else since then, when he was ranked 9th, he's now ranked 2nd without having another fight. And he's fighting Daniel Dubois next. So if Michael Hunter comes through that fight against Mike Wilson, he could potentially face somebody like Trevor Bryan, Robert Helenius, Bogdan Dinu as a final eliminator. Now, I know you guys are probably saying, well, let's face it, the best of those is probably Daniel Dubois. But what do we really know about Daniel Dubois' condition? What we've seen with Mark Tibbs is that he's broken away now from Daniel Dubois. Why? What's happened? Daniel Dubois he's signing up with Shane McGuigan. He hasn't fought under Tibbs yet. He hasn't been in his corner once. Why? Did Mark Tibbs see something? Now, the official narrative, according to the Mail, is that Mark Tibbs has other engagements and cannot dedicate himself at the moment to Dubois. He has other commitments. If he feels that Daniel Dubois can really become the heavyweight champion of the world, do you really think he's going to prioritize other boxing commitments? I'm not so sure. You know, when a lawyer is representing a client, if they don't believe in that client's innocence, or if they're pretty sure they're guilty, if they've seen some really incriminating evidence, and it's a really heinous crime, that lawyer might think to himself, I can't represent this guy. But he can't come out and tell the judge, Your Honor, I know that he raped and killed that woman. He can't do that. He'll be disbarred. So what a lawyer can do is simply say that for whatever reason, he is not in a position anymore where he can, in good grace and in good conscience, represent the client. Now, this could be devastating to the client's case, but essentially, he's just saying, I can't represent him anymore. And he has to find another lawyer. This could also damage the lawyer's reputation among other potential clients, of course, but he won't be disbarred. Are we seeing that analogy in boxing here with Tibbs? Has he stepped in, looked at Daniel Dubois, and is he seeing something that is worrying him? The demons are still there post Joe Joyce. Or, even worse than that, what if that eye is still a major problem? This sort of injury, as I said the other day, they did a Sky Sports article about it, and Paulie Malignaggi spoke about it. Fighters that take on this sort of orbital bone injury are never the same again. It breaks a lot easier because of the pain involved, especially if there's nerve damage. They will feel shots a lot more, and so they become more protective of it, and they become less confident. So they're suddenly no longer feeling indestructible because they literally know they're not indestructible. So has Tibbs seen something where he's just thought, this guy's done. He's not getting to the top. In which case, even Daniel Dubois, who's a formidable opponent, even that name doesn't look that intimidating, does it? For a guy like Michael Hunter, who starts early and is sudden, and he'll be thinking to himself, if I get in quickly against this guy, I'm going to be able to bust that eye up many times before he even finds a rhythm. So while I don't condone what Michael Hunter's done here, from the perspective of his training team and his management team, I get it. Why fight Hrgovic when I can target Brian, Helenius, Dinu, or perhaps a permanently damaged Daniel Dubois in a final eliminator after I get past Mike Wilson? Now, we all know there's karma in the sport, and who knows? We've seen shocks happen before. How do you know that, Mike Wilson won't go and pull off an upset, or one of these other guys won't pull off an upset? But from the perspective of probability and calculating it, surely you can see why Michael Hunter's gone down this route, right? Well, one of the other issues I want to bring up, before I do that, Filip Hrgovic, by the way, might be looking at this and thinking, you know what? They're all ducking me now because I'm not a big name. I'm not really getting in the news much. So I've got to start trash talking too and hoping that I can get myself a fight. Well, Love Boxing TV put a tweet up which says a quote of Hrgovic, and it goes like this. Anthony Joshua is the bigger puncher. He throws more combinations. He's good with the jab and fast with his feet. He is better at inside fighting. Tyson Fury has an awkward style, but that's all he has. Now, you might genuinely think all those things about Anthony Joshua. You might feel that, he throws combinations, he's got a better jab, he's great with his feet, he's better on the inside. I prefer Tyson Fury. That might be your opinion. But I highly doubt you believe that all Tyson Fury has is that he's awkward. Someone would have taken him out by now if all he was is awkward, right? So why is he saying that? Is he saying that because he's starting to realize, I've got to start trash talking because no one wants to fight me? Now, I'm sure he's going to get backlash for that and people are going to be getting on his case, but that's the point. Boxers need to start doing these sorts of things when they can't get a fight. And that brings us nicely onto Demetrius Andrade. Love Boxing TV, shout out to them, have also done an interview with Demetrius Andrade. And he was talking about Canelo Alvarez and his opinion on Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury as well. So check out that interview. But basically, he's desperate for a Canelo Alvarez fight. And he gate crashed the post-fight interview between Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders. And as you all know, you've all seen that epic rant in English now from Canelo. Very, very entertaining. But the consistent narrative seems to be, you haven't fought anybody. The problem with all these big names, and I'm not saying Canelo should fight Demetrius Andrade, because Canelo clearly has a plan now, and it has to be the undisputed super middleweight championship of the world. But the fact that after that, they're talking about a potential fight in the UK, maybe they're looking to go up to light heavyweight, okay? But if not, then Demetrius Andrade deserves a big fight against somebody. If it's not Canelo, it has to be somebody. A lot of people are saying he's no one, he's overrated, he nearly got knocked out by Liam Williams, he got buzzed by Liam Williams, like anybody's afraid of Andrade. If they're not afraid of Andrade, Charlo, Canelo, none of them are afraid of him, they're not bothered about him, why don't you just go and take his middleweight belt? Now, like I said, I get why Canelo wouldn't right now, but the point is this idea that you haven't fought anyone and you're just a bum when he's got a middleweight title. Take it off him. I don't understand. People used to call Demetrius Andrade boring. Well, now that he's there at press conferences and running his mouth, and to be fair, he was actually quite respectful there. It was Canelo that kicked off. But the fact that he's trying to make a scene and be there and get in people's faces, That's certainly not boring. You're not going to find a boxing fan in the world that doesn't love these face-to-face confrontations. And let's be honest, is it not a blueprint that has worked in the past? Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. Plant got in Billy Joe Saunders' face at a press conference and they had an argument and nothing came of that. But it gets names known. Didn't Keith Thurman turn up at a Paulie Malignaggi press conference and said, "You better not duck me, son. You better not duck me." Remember that? And Paulie Malignaggi was telling him to get in line and stuff like that. Didn't David Haye start to follow Vladimir Klitschko around everywhere when he went up from cruiserweight to heavyweight, demanding a fight? Didn't he turn up at the post-fight press conference between Vitaly Klitschko and Derek Chisora, which led to that famous melee, which then led to a pay-per-view fight in the UK between Chisora and David Haye? Didn't that make stuff happen? Didn't it make the headline news and make a fight come of it? You know, these things are how you make fights. Shannon Briggs, although he didn't get the fight, he's become known globally in the boxing world, at least, with Let's Go Champ, because he used to follow Vladimir Klitschko around, knocking him off paddle boards, eating from his food as Vladimir Klitschko pours water on his head, causing a brawl in a restaurant or plate smashing in a restaurant. This is what you want to see as a boxing fan. It gets us laughing, it gets us talking. We like to see a beef, and don't make out like you don't, because you know you do. So when you've got guys like Michael Hunter that are doing what they're doing, which from a business perspective, I understand, but from a boxing fan perspective, I really dislike. Why are you then hating on Andrade as well, or criticizing on Andrade as well, when he's trying to make things happen? Now, I always give the opposing side of an argument here on this channel, as you guys know. The big negative against Andrade is that he did have that fight against Charlo, the younger Charlo, or the lighter Charlo. Which one's younger and older? I don't know, man. But the light middleweight Charlo, he had a fight lined up against him. And that fight didn't happen, right? I think it was at light middleweight at the time. That fight didn't happen because Andrade pulled out in the last week of the fight. Now, I'm not sure of the ins and outs of that. You know, I know there was some beef regarding payment and money. I don't know whether there's truth to that, whether something changed and he was unhappy with the contract and he walked away in the same way Billy Joe Saunders threatened to walk away, Andrade actually did. Or if, you know, who knows, maybe camp wasn't going well and he decided, I'm not ready for this, and it was a straight up duck. I don't know. You guys can enlighten me in the comments down below. But the fact of the matter is, that aside, what do you want him to do? You can't, just because of that one thing that happened a long time ago, you can't expect no big name to ever fight him again, right? So if he's not going to get in the ring with any of the big names and their excuse is you haven't fought anyone, but none of them will fight him, what do you want him to do? He's got to cause a furore to cause interest. So you can't get angry at both Hunter for manufacturing his path and at an Andrade who's trying to get the big fights in a manner that you might not like. Anyway, let me know what you think about all this. Finally, just before I go, another little tidbit for the British fight fans out there. Frank Buglioni, who was a very exciting light heavyweight. He got stopped by Callum Johnson, and I believe that was the last we saw of him. He got stopped early, but he was a good fighter, Frank Buglioni, in terms of, you know, domestic level, maybe European level, a good fighter, very aggressive. You enjoyed watching him, heavy-handed guy, very heavy-handed guy. He had that famous fight, famous domestically speaking, against Hosea Burton, whereby Burton, a big, lanky, tall, light heavyweight who's related to Tyson Fury, he was way ahead on the scorecards. He'd won, I don't know, pretty much every round. He was way ahead. And then in the last round of the fight, Frank Buglioni caught him with a shot and knocked him out. And it was in the last round and he needed that knockout to win the fight. And it's there's always been this talk of a potential rematch. By the way, it wasn't the last fight he had against Callum Johnson. He had two more since then. I remember now he lost to Fan Long Meng, who in Monaco, that fight. I remember it was a really eerie atmosphere. Now that we've, you know, seen fights in lockdown, it doesn't look as eerie, but at the time it looked quite eerie. But prior to that, he'd had a really good run of form, Frank Buglioni. He'd beaten Hosea Burton, like I said. He beat Ricky Summers, who was 13-0. He beat Craig Spider Richards, who had since gone on to fight Bivol and gave a very good account of himself. And then he got stopped by Callum Johnson. He then won another fight and then against Feizu, and then he lost to Meng and he retired. Well, he's put out a tweet and he's looking good on the bag, and of course anybody can look good on the bag, but he does look good. Like I said, a heavy-handed guy, and and he's put out a tweet to say, what are you saying, Hosea Burton? We've had wars at middleweight and light heavy. One more at cruiser. Hashtag team wise guy. Hosea Burton replied, I can't see why not. You retired rather than give me a rematch at light heavy. And yeah, they're back and forth on Twitter. And Frank Buglioni said you've got to be careful when you're knocking at the devil's door or something like that. If you keep knocking at the devil's door, you know what happens. And Hosea Burton said, all I need is a date and I'll stop knocking. And Frank Buglioni said, end of the year. You won't like what answers the door though. So for the domestic fight fans out there, I know it's been a long time since Frank was active, but nonetheless, wouldn't mind seeing that rematch. I don't know, I like the idea. Might be 5 years gone, but I'd watch that. Let me know what you think, guys, about everything we've discussed here. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.